Chapter 717. However, even if it was a clash of bows and arrows, there was still the matter of who was the main attacker and who was the auxiliary attacker. As the chase continued, it was clear that the mercenaries who were charging in from the front had an advantage. The Tatar cavalry who were constantly retreating had suffered losses, and the number of cavalry had been sharply decreasing. Fortunately, the sky was completely dark at this time. If it was daytime, the losses would be even greater. However, the night also had its disadvantages. As they continuously retreated, the formation of the Tatar cavalry was already extremely chaotic. Some of the cavalry had run off to who knows where, making it impossible for them to form an effective defensive formation. They were unable to form a dense net like the mercenaries once they launched an arrow attack. As they kept retreating and the formation was in chaos, the Tatar cavalry's counterattack with bows and arrows no longer had the ability to deter them. They could only passively take a beating. In the end, even General Su He himself separated from the main force with only a dozen soldiers. He still wanted to gather the scattered soldiers, but he didn't know where to find them. He sighed inwardly at his brother's good luck and could only lead the dozen or so personal guards to chase in the direction of the main force. The 3,000 Tatar cavalry were defeated just like that. Apart from the initial threat of the arrows, they didn't put up any decent resistance. From start to finish, they only delayed Yang Chundong's troops for a little more than 2 hours. The main force of the mercenaries once again entered the process of chasing the enemy. During this time, the main force of the Tatar cavalry didn't run very far. This was because not long after they escaped from the southern forest under the leadership of Lord Agar Dorje, they encountered the Tiger's Man Independent Regiment and the Windchaser Regiment that were responsible for ambushing and blocking. The two regiments were ordered to guard the retreat of the Tatar cavalry. Just as they began to set up the battlefield and ambush, they saw many figures in the distance. The main force of the Tatar cavalry was rushing over. Attack! Tiger's Man didn't even have time to dig up the mines. He led his 3 gun brigades to launch a frontal assault on the retreating Tatar cavalry. The sudden gunshots, the dense gunshots without any warning, and the whistling of the flames that could be seen in the darkness, instantly disrupted the formation of the retreating Tatar cavalry. After a series of gunshots, at least a few hundred riders died on their horses, and over 1,000 were injured to varying degrees. Seeing the firearm battalion of the mercenaries here, Agar Dorje, who was following the army, naturally turned pale with fright. What he was more worried about wasn't how much of an attack he had suffered. He was more worried about why there were so many mercenaries here. Shouldn't they have been pinned down by General Glenn's headquarters on the northern slope of the West River? Could it be that their appearance here meant that something had already happened on both sides? As soon as this thought appeared in his mind, Agar Dorje felt uneasy. When the Kiliarchs came to ask for instructions, he actually didn't have a definite idea. Speaking of which, Agar Dorje's military talent wasn't very good. It was only because he was born into a good family and had followed his elder brother Tuachua Buhua since he was young that he gradually began to master the military. When it came to controlling people's hearts, he might have some methods, but when it came to commanding on the battlefield, his ability was far inferior. In his confusion, Agar Dorje, who didn't have much military talent to begin with, didn't have any better ideas. Faced with the instructions of his junior generals, he could only order the army to charge through the enemy's defensive line. Only in this way could they have a chance to escape. Without a strict organization, the Tatar cavalry charged in 1,000-men formation. However, facing Tiger's Man's 3 gun brigades, 7 cavalry brigades, and more than 2,000 cavalry from the Windchaser group, such a charge naturally caused heavy losses. The battle lasted for more than 2 hours. Apart from about 3,000 cavalry that managed to break through the encirclement, the rest of the Tatar cavalry were still trapped here, unable to escape. It was at this time that General Su He rushed over with a dozen soldiers. Agar Dorje, who was at his wits' end, was overjoyed when he heard the news and wanted to hand over the command of the army to him. However, when the two met, General Su He's head was already covered in cold sweat. The first sentence he said made Agar Dorje feel as if the heavens wanted to kill him. "Sir, behind me is the main force of the mercenaries. This time, with 2 sides surrounding us, I'm afraid that the army won't be able to escape destruction so fast." Hearing that the main force of the mercenaries was coming from behind, Agar Dorje felt as if the world was spinning and he couldn't see any hope. In contrast, Su He was much calmer. Although the current situation was very difficult, it wasn't that they didn't have any advantages. For example, Their current total military strength was higher than the enemy's. For example, it was now night and they were better at escaping. Of course, even if they had more military strength than the enemy, Suhi wasn't arrogant enough to think that they could achieve a full counterattack and achieve victory. The continuous escape had caused the army to lose the most important morale. To put it more harshly, the morale of the army might collapse at any time. Once that happened, there was no doubt that they would lose. Although Agar Dorji had many faults, such as being greedy, cowardly, bullying the weak, and fearing the strong, in any case, this person was still his superior. If Agar didn't put him in an important position, he wouldn't be where he was today. At this moment, Suhi made up his mind to repay Agar Dorji. Your Excellency, it is impossible to turn the tables now. You can only escape and hope that you can rise again to take revenge for what happened today. Suhi said as if she had made some kind of decision. When he made this decision, he was also prepared to sacrifice himself at any time. Agar Dorji was shocked by Suhi's decision. He was a little touched and asked, "If I leave, what about you, General?" "Me? Of course I'll stay and lead the army to fight the mercenaries. If I don't do that, I'm afraid that you won't be able to take the opportunity to escape." Suhi smiled bitterly. Who didn't want to live? But when he was destined to sacrifice others, he could only choose to stay. After all, the other party was Agar Dorji and he was only a general under him. Agar Dorji of course knew this truth. At this moment, he was extremely excited and angry. He was excited because Suhi was willing to sacrifice him to protect himself. He was angry because this battle had cost them everything. From now on, he could no longer be a powerful force on the prairie. The glory of the past had nothing to do with him. Regardless of what he thought, Agar Dorji finally agreed to Suhi's request and chose to leave. At this time, he really handed over the command of the army to Suhi. He only left 3,000 elite cavalrymen with him to break out of the encirclement. After Suhi got the command, the first thing she did was to let the soldiers around her spread the news that General Gulang of the North Slope and Hala Ruo of the West River were coming here. As long as they could hold on until dawn, the army would come to support them and turn the tide. Of course, this was impossible. According to Suhi's judgment, it was very likely that the two armies had met with mishap. Otherwise, where would the mercenaries find the strength to intercept him here? But he still had to tell the public this. Only then would the morale of the army not be in chaos and not collapse, creating a chance for Agar Dorji to escape. Sure enough, Suhi's strategy was correct. After the news was released, the originally chaotic Tatar cavalry calmed down a lot. People were afraid of having no hope. As long as there was hope, anyone would think of a way to fight for it. The morale of the army was temporarily stabilized. Suhi commanded the army to form a defensive line to block the attacks of the mercenaries behind him. At the same time, he sent 2,000 cavalrymen to charge at the mercenaries blocking the road. He wanted to tear a hole in the front in the shortest time possible to create a chance for Agar Dorji to escape. With the morale of the army stabilized, the orders were carried out seriously by the cavalrymen below. When Yang Chendong brought the main army to the rear of the Tatar cavalry, it was not as easy as expected. Instead, it was met with strong resistance. What's going on? Yang Chendong saw that many of the mercenaries were too careless and rushed too quickly. As soon as they entered the defensive line of the Tatar cavalry, they were submerged. In a short period of time, they lost hundreds of cavalrymen. He ordered his men to stop the attack and called over the scouts to ask about the situation. The battalion commander of the reconnaissance battalion, Su Yunsheng, had already joined the army at this moment. When he was called over by Yang Chendong for questioning, he told him what he saw. Sixth young master, the Tatar cavalry was indeed in chaos before, but because of the arrival of Suhi, the situation changed. I don't know why they stabilized the morale of the army and had the power to fight back. After all, the time it happened was too short. It was already very difficult for the reconnaissance battalion to obtain this information. Yang Chendong did not mean to blame the other party. Instead, he asked with interest, after Suhi came back, the morale of the army stabilized? It seems that this person has some ability. Yes, we learned from some of the prisoners that the order to retreat was also given by this person. It seems that his insight on the battlefield is also good. Beta Persei added. Haha, then I am interested in this person. Yang Chendong laughed. Now was the time to use people. If the other party was really capable, then he did not mind recruiting him for his own use. It was just that the enemy had not been defeated yet. It was a bit too early to think about this. Like this, give the order. Don't rush to attack. When the army arrives, launch a fierce attack in units of battalions and companies. We need to advance in all directions. We can't do any individual breakthroughs. Also, the reconnaissance battalion must immediately figure out the situation and allow you to see the prisoners freely. Yang Qindong was not willing to fight a battle that he was not confident in. At least, he would not rashly launch a fierce attack before he figured out what was going on in the enemy camp. Chapter 7:18. Beta Persei and Su Yunxing went to carry out the order. Soon, the mercenaries' attack changed from the previous random attacks to an organized advance. As a result, the Tatar cavalry fell into a situation where they were forced to retreat step by step. It was beyond Su He's expectation that the mercenaries behind him reacted so quickly. He guessed that there might be a general in the enemy's camp who knew more about tactics and was commanding them. But now, he was not concerned about this. He was more concerned about whether the 2,000 cavalrymen he sent would be able to open a bloody path for Lord Agar Dorji to escape. Under the command of Death, the 2,000 Tatar cavalrymen launched a suicidal attack. They were not afraid of the bullets and mercenaries who were several times their number. They just lowered their heads and charged forward. This kind of desperate fighting style finally allowed them to tear open a hole, giving Lord Agar Dorji an escape route. The 3,000 Tatar cavalrymen, who were also carrying hope, left the group. In addition to the ones who fled before, there were already 6,000 to 7,000 Tatar cavalrymen who rushed out. The Tatar cavalry paid a price. Of the 2,000 cavalrymen sent out, apart from those who died in battle or were captured, none of them returned to the barracks. Phew! Suhi breathed a long sigh of relief. Her heart, which had been hanging high before, was relieved. Now that Agar Dorji had escaped, his only worry was gone. The next step was to fight a bloody battle with the mercenaries. He would use his death to prove that the Tatar cavalry was not to be trifled with. At this time, nearly 2 hours had passed since Yang Qindong summoned Su Yunxing. In an hour, the sky would be bright. At this time, Battalion Commander Su finally learned from the captives that Suhi was able to unify the troops and quickly reported it to the 6th young master. Oh, this Suhi actually came up with such an idea. He really has some ability. After listening to Su Yunxing's story, Yang Qindong couldn't help but sigh. This Suhi was really a capable person. Previously, he didn't know how the other party did it, so he could only win step by step. But now that he knew the method the other party used, he only needed to find a way to counter it. How about this? Pass down my orders. Everyone, stop attacking and wait for daybreak. Once the enemy attacks, the musketeers will be at the front and the archers will be at the back, suppressing them from breaking through. This was not the result that Yang Qindong wanted to see. Since that was the case, he would just surround them and not attack. What he wanted now was not to destroy them, but to conquer them. The mercenaries suddenly stopped their fierce attacks, and the front line became quiet. This scene caught Su He, who was in the midst of the final battle, off guard. When he heard that there were no more sounds of killing coming from outside, he didn't know why, but he had a bad feeling. General, could it be that they are preparing for a big attack? Some Kiliarchs who were also confused came to Su He and asked for instructions. Someone asked, General, it's almost dawn. When will our reinforcements arrive? That's right. The soldiers below are looking forward to it. After a night of fighting, everyone is tired and suffered heavy losses. The soldiers below are very nervous. Su He obviously couldn't say that there were no reinforcements at all. Otherwise, the army would lose their morale and be unable to fight. In order to stabilize the situation, he could only continue to make arrangements. It's not far from dawn. The reinforcements should be here soon. What we need to do now is to accumulate strength. Once the reinforcements arrive, we will attack from the inside and outside and completely defeat the mercenaries. Hearing Su He's certainty, the Kiliarchs below couldn't help but smile with joy. They immediately agreed that they would do their best to stabilize the morale of the army before leaving. Su He, who was left behind, was puzzled. Could it be that the mercenaries were really preparing to launch a big attack? If that was the case, he had already decided to lead the army to fight to the death. When the time came, even if he died in battle, he would be able to deal a huge blow to the mercenaries. He wouldn't have lived in vain. But what if the other party wasn't going to attack? What if they had other plans? What should he do then? He looked up at the sky, although it was still so dark. However, Suhi knew that the sky would brighten in 2 hours. In other words, there wasn't much time left for him to fight. Suhi knew that he was going to die. He wanted to fight a bloody battle with the mercenaries and die on the battlefield with the dignity of a soldier. Unfortunately, the mercenaries didn't act according to his plan. They suddenly stopped attacking and just surrounded him from afar. This gave Suhi a bad feeling in his heart. As the saying goes, what you are afraid of will come true. Just when Suhi was wondering if the other party had figured out her plan, suddenly there was a shout from the front line. The voice that only belonged to the Han people came clearly at this moment. Brothers of the Tatar cavalry, you have been fooled. You won't have any reinforcements at all. No matter Hala Ruachu of the Shiha regiment or Jelong of the North Slope regiment, they have been defeated by our mercenaries. We even captured Hala Ruachu alive. Now you are all alone. Surrender immediately. Otherwise you will only die, and it won't be worth it. Tatar cavalry brothers, you have been fooled. We won't have any reinforcements no matter. The shout came one after another. It was transmitted to the Tatar army through the simple loudspeakers. When the cavalrymen heard the news for the first time, they all looked at each other with ugly and angry expressions. Their faces were ugly because of the situation they were in. They were angry because they knew that they were fooled. For a moment, the camp was like a nest that exploded. No matter how hard the Kiliarchs tried, they couldn't suppress it anymore. Left with no choice, these Kiliarchs could only band together and come to Suhi to ask for an explanation. Suhi didn't panic like everyone thought. Instead, he rode on his horse calmly. Looking at the angry Kiliarchs, he lowered his head and admitted his mistake. I'm sorry everyone. I lied before. We might really have no reinforcements. What? Really no reinforcements? If that's the case, what should we do next? Without reinforcements, we won't be a match for the mercenaries. That's right. What should we do? General Su, please come up with a plan. The Kiliarchs all talked at once. Facing Suhi, who admitted everything, they suddenly realized that they weren't that angry. After all, he didn't take the opportunity to escape. Instead, he stayed here like everyone else. With this, they couldn't vent their anger. First, Suhi calmed the Kiliarchs down. Then, he talked about how to deal with the mercenaries. Brothers, it's obvious that the mercenaries want to use psychological tactics to win without a fight. If that's the case, we'll all become their prisoners. We'll even live a life worse than death. Since that's the case, why don't we give it a try? Maybe we'll have a chance to survive. Even if I can't escape and die on the battlefield, I can die a happy death and be a hero. General, you mean? The Kiliarchs had already guessed what Suhi was going to do next. I mean, let's give it a try and kill our way out. Let's leave it to fate. Suhi also knew that at this moment, he could only tell the truth. Only then would they have a chance to live. Breaking out of the encirclement wasn't an easy thing to do. Most people might even lose their lives here. But as Suhi said, if they didn't do this, they didn't have any better choice now. These Kiliarchs looked at each other and finally nodded helplessly. After getting the support of these Kiliarchs, Suhi immediately gave the order for the entire army to charge out under the cover of the moonlight. After the order was given, the Tatar cavalry who were still doubting whether they were tricked were speechless by General Suhi's sincerity. Although they were angry, they didn't want to be captives. They didn't even dare to imagine what life would be like as captives. They could only try their best and hope that the heavens would take care of them and let them live. Every single one of them held on to the hope that they could survive. One by one, they unsheathed their cavalry sabers. Taking advantage of the fact that the sky had yet to brighten, they charged out to kill. When the hundreds and thousands of Tatar cavalry charged out, their battle formation was quite large. The moment the earth shook, the Tiger's Man Independent Regiment guarding the outermost perimeter felt it. As the regiment commander, Tiger's Man immediately ordered the 3 battalions of musketeers to get ready. At the same time, he ordered the soldiers who were burying the mines to retreat and prepare for battle. Behind the independent regiment, The Wind Chaser division that reinforced the 1st Regiment of Cavalry also prepared their bows and arrows, ready to fire at any time when the enemy approached. More and more Tatar cavalrymen were charging towards them. They seemed to have understood their situation. If their first charge was fruitless, then it would be even more difficult for them to come up with a good result. This time, the number of cavalrymen charging towards them increased, and their speed was also very fast. Although it was night, the earth was shaking, giving people the feeling that thousands of men and horses were bravely charging through a single plank bridge. Because of this, many of the mercenaries' expressions became very cold. Some of the soldiers even had cold sweat coming out of their palms. Sensing the nervousness of the soldiers, Tiger Edge, who had always been by Yang Chendong's side and had developed the aura of a general, laughed out loud. "Everyone, don't panic. We are well prepared. The enemy won't be able to rush over." As if to prove his words, a deafening explosion suddenly rang out. Streaks of fire soared into the sky and dyed the originally dark night. It actually lit up the eyes of the soldiers, allowing them to clearly see everything that was happening in front of them. Chapter 719. In the end, the Tatar cavalry still managed to rush into the landmines, triggering lightning and fire, sending countless enemy cavalry into the sky. After the landmines exploded, the fragments flew into the bodies of many Tatar cavalrymen, making them look like hedgehogs, screaming and wailing in pain. Under this kind of attack, the Tatar cavalry that rushed quickly became the target of the attack. Some of the cavalry at the front didn't even have time to shout before they were swallowed up by the ruthless power of the landmines. The powerful landmines caused the Tatar cavalry to involuntarily stop in their tracks. Their faces were pale as they looked forward. Their hearts were filled with complex feelings, but they were unable to speak. Fire! With the help of the monstrous flames, Tiger's man noticed that many Tatar cavalry had stopped 500 meters in front of them. He made a prompt decision and gave the order to fire. He knew that at this time, if he gave the enemy a heavy blow, it would be the last straw. It would play an extremely important role in deterring the enemy. With a loud shout, the 3 battalions fired at the same time. Although in the darkness, the accuracy of these auxiliary soldiers was greatly reduced, but the number of Tatar cavalry was large enough. Coupled with the fact that they weren't prepared at all, a burst of gunshots rang out. Who knew how many Tatar cavalry fell from their horses? First, the landmines sent people into the sky. Then the firearms easily took people's lives. Under this kind of pressure, the Tatar cavalry had no choice but to retreat one by one. Originally, it seemed that the first attack with great momentum was fruitless. On the contrary, it was a big blow to their morale. After the failure of the assault, when most of the cavalry returned, many of them had a pessimistic expression on their faces. Many of them were already scared. In this kind of situation where they couldn't even see how many enemies there were and where they were, many of their brothers had died. This kind of fighting style really made them unable to see any hope of victory. After he learned about the situation at the front line, he couldn't say a word for a long time. He knew that the situation might be worse than he imagined. If they couldn't rush out, then wouldn't it mean that they could only choose to surrender? The battlefield once again fell into silence. The mercenaries' voices came again. It was still the same words as before, but compared to before, this time some people began to be moved. The curses were also much less than before. The persuasion continued and the sky finally began to brighten. After their vision returned to normal, the Tatar cavalry only felt more despair. In this kind of situation where their every move was clearly seen by the enemy, it would naturally be much more difficult for them to escape. At dawn, the persuasion continued, but the mercenaries didn't take a step forward. They also didn't rely on the advantage of the firearms in their hands to attack. Instead, they began to cook. Smoke spirals, and not long after, the aroma of meat. "Young master, our logistics camp chefs are all here. They are still using the condiments produced in Crimson City. Along with the freshly slaughtered meat, it will definitely be fragrant." Yang Er walked in front of Yang Chendong as if he was presenting a treasure, looking for praise. "Very good." Yang Chendong nodded with satisfaction. While looking at the Tatar cavalry camp, he said, "Food is the most important thing to the people. The temptation of food can often achieve the goal of invincibility." Yang Chendong's guess was right. Using food to lure the enemy had proven to be very useful. In the past, the mercenaries had often used this trick to destroy the enemy's morale. This time it was also successful. Yesterday afternoon, before the sky turned dark, they had eaten dinner. Now, it had been nearly 12 hours. During their escape, because the mercenaries were chasing closely behind them, some of the pots and bowls of food they brought along were thrown away halfway. They thought that they could kill their way out before dawn, so no one was worried about this matter. But now, after dawn, many of the cavalry's stomachs began to growl. Although many of them had a certain amount of dry food on them, it was absolutely not a problem for them to survive for at least 2 or 3 days. But the problem was that that was cold food. How could it be compared to hot food that was overflowing with the aroma of meat? After using the MSG and other things produced by Chicken City, the taste was particularly delicious. Saying that the aroma would spread for 10 miles might be an exaggeration, but with the morning breeze, it would not be a problem for it to spread for 2 to 3 miles on the open ground. When the aroma spread to the Tatar cavalry camp, many of the cavalry's expressions became somewhat abnormal. Especially those who were preparing to take out their dry food, their expressions became even more unsightly. Comparing people to people would lead to death, and comparing goods would lead to throwing away. Compared to the aroma of the fresh meat, the cold dry food was too tasteless. At this time, the voice urging them to surrender sounded again. Among them, there were some words about food. For example, the mercenaries promised that as long as they surrendered, they would immediately be able to eat fresh meat. At that time, they would be able to eat hot flatbread and drink meat soup. It would definitely be a delicacy. The picture outlined made many of the cavalry unable to help but make a swallowing motion. Then, the soldiers looked at each other, as if they were somewhat tempted. Hello everyone. My name is Hulu, an authentic Mongolian. In a battle, I became a captive of the mercenaries. I originally thought that my life would be worse than death. But who would have thought that not only would I be able to live a better life and receive more money every month, I would also become a commander of 1,000 soldiers. The reason why I'm telling you all this is to tell you that the reason why we gave up our homes and fought with our blood and flesh is because we want to live a better life. Right now, the opportunity is in front of you. As long as everyone surrenders to the mercenaries like me, as long as you have the ability, you do not have to worry about not being valued. This is the most realistic experience of a surrendered commander of 1,000 soldiers. Hello everyone, my name is Taimu-er, a Nuzan cavalry. It was also in a battle that I became a captive of the mercenaries. Similarly, I am now a commander of a battalion. Now, I can save up a lot of money every month. Not only is my food better than before, my clothes are also better than before. Once this war is over, I can find a beautiful girl from the grassland and start a family. Then, I will have a bunch of children and live a life where I will not have to worry about food and drink. Ha! Hello everyone, my name is Lu Dai, and I am also a Nuzan. I am also a captive. Previously, I was a deputy Jianghu in Beiming's new Ergon Dusi region. Now that I am a deputy commander, my treatment is more than 10 times better than before. Come quickly, there is delicious food that can strengthen our bodies. There are even sharper and more durable cavalry swords. There are also more high positions waiting for you. As long as everyone is willing to work hard, your future is limitless. Hello everyone, my name is Yi La, and I was originally a Jianghu in Beiming's new Ergon Dusi region. Now, I am a commander of the Nuzan cavalry. After coming to the mercenaries, the most authentic experience I have had is that they have the best military treatment in the world. They have the strongest weapons in the world. They also have the most generous rewards in the world. As long as you are here, as long as you can mount a horse and kill the enemy, as long as you are sincere enough, this place will become the paradise you have always dreamed of. Come, we welcome you. One by one, the officers stepped forward to share their experiences. They expressed their views on the mercenaries and their own experiences from different perspectives. They did not speak of any great principles, but the more simple their words were, the more they could gain the approval of the ordinary cavalry. They could resonate with them. As the voices of these officers reached the Tatar camp, the expressions of many of the cavalry changed. They were eager to move. It was as if they were only missing an opportunity to stand up and choose to surrender. The Kiliarchs who were in charge of them naturally felt this change. They all anxiously went to General Su He, hoping that he could think of a solution that would satisfy both sides. However, Su He did not say anything. He only looked at the sky helplessly and shook his head. Everyone had the right to choose their own way of life and their own future. He could not interfere. In fact, he could not interfere either. Otherwise, if he forcefully suppressed them, it would cause a mutiny. On the contrary, if these soldiers could have a good way out, he would be happy. Forget it. Since that is the case, let's send some of the injured soldiers to them first. It is also good to see if these mercenaries are true to their words. If they are, you can choose to surrender in order to live a better life. If not, then we'll fight them to the death. At worst, we'll just die. Hearing Suhi's words, all the Kiliarchs were speechless. However, they could not refute it. Could they say that the general was wrong? Could it be that it was wrong for a general to find a way out for his soldiers? No one objected and they could not object. After the order was passed down, some of the wounded Tatar cavalry became the first batch of captives to be sent to the mercenaries. Then everyone watched helplessly as the mercenaries dispatched a lot of troops. They used a stretcher to carry the Tatar cavalry away from the battlefield. At this moment, some people were envious of the injured soldiers. It seemed that only the wounded could openly defect to the enemy without being blamed by anyone. There were still calls to surrender from time to time, but as time passed, no one knew if the Tatar cavalry had become numb or if there were orders from above. In short, no one saw any uninjured cavalry choose to surrender. Chapter 7:20. Time passed little by little. When it was noon, the smell of meat came from afar. Along with it came another trump card. Some of the injured Tatar cavalrymen were sent back to the center of the battlefield. Brothers, I'm Gushan. I'm sure many of you know me. I was injured by an arrow and couldn't ride a horse, so I was sent to the mercenaries as a captive. A Tatar cavalryman on a horse shouted. Such a shout quickly caused a burst of discussion in the Tatar camp. That person is indeed Gushan. His hometown is not far from mine, so I know him. He is Gushan. He was originally with me. Even if he turned into ashes, I would still recognize him. I just didn't expect that when we left this morning, he couldn't get on a horse, but now he can ride a horse. Immediately, several Tatar cavalrymen took the initiative to testify, proving Gushan's true identity. After his identity was confirmed, Gushan's words were more credible. When he talked about his experience, everyone naturally chose to listen carefully. After listening to his story, they also knew what happened to him in the mercenaries. In Gushan's own words, although he was a captive, he was different from a captive. Since he and his injured companions came to the mercenaries, they were immediately surrounded by a group of medical officers called military doctors. Then, all kinds of examinations, all kinds of treatment, all kinds of medicine, and all kinds of methods were used. After the treatment, hot meat soup and flatbread were served in front of him. The people who surrounded him were also Mongolian men. Through the conversation, he knew that the Mongolian soldiers in front of him were not fake. Through the conversation, he gained a deeper understanding of the mercenary army system, and he also gained a deeper understanding of how the soldiers were treated. Gushan was a person who could speak. After he saw that many people were listening to him carefully, he bluntly announced that the treatment of soldiers was soldiers was 10 taels of silver a month. Soldiers were 15 taels of silver a month. The so-called B soldiers were the second-line troops with weaker fighting ability. The A soldiers were naturally the first-line troops with tyrannical strength. When this treatment was announced, it immediately attracted the attention of the Tatar cavalrymen who were listening carefully. The Tatar cavalrymen were only paid 2 taels of silver a month. Of course, if there was a war, there would still be some extra benefits. For example, they could keep a portion of the things they looted. The military merits they obtained could also be exchanged for a portion of silver taels. But even so, on average, the amount of silver they received each month was still limited. It was far from being as generous as the salary of the mercenaries. Not to mention, according to what Gushan had heard, once the mercenaries were involved in a war, their rewards would only be greater. For example, if you killed an enemy on the battlefield, you could get a reward of 1 to 10 taels of silver. This also depended on who you killed. Hearing this, the Tatar cavalrymen's eyes revealed excitement and even yearning. The cavalry here were all Tatar elites. In terms of combat ability, they were more powerful than the Tatar cavalry at the West River and the North Slope. All capable people were conceited. Things like military exploits were as easy as eating a meal in their hands. Who wouldn't be tempted when they heard that they could receive so many rewards for their military service? The so-called capable people needed a platform to display their abilities, and the mercenary group was obviously a very good platform to display their abilities. It made the hearts of the capable people yearn for it. Speaking of the treatment of the Mongol cavalrymen, although their ability to march and fight was very strong, due to the constraints of the environment, they did not seem to have much creativity other than fighting and hurting. Because of this, their treatment had always been very poor. It was even worse than the Baiming army, the original Nuzan tribe, and the Mongol tribe in Narcissus town. The price they paid was not proportional to the benefits they received. This made many of the Tatar cavalrymen resentful. But when they thought about how everyone was like this on the Mongolian grassland, they slowly balanced out. But balance did not mean that they had truly accepted it. They still wanted to prove themselves and improve their treatment. After all, with money they could do many things. This was something that everyone knew. Why did the Mongol cavalrymen always like to plunder? It would not take long for them to think of attacking the Central Plains. Wasn't it because they were too poor? Everyone knew that the Central Plains was vast with abundant resources. The people there were also very rich. If they did not target them, who else would they target? Although many people would die in every war, compared to the benefits, the risk was worth it. But now, they did not need to go out of the grassland to plunder others. They could also receive good treatment. This was equivalent to having benefits in front of them. How many people would not be tempted? How many people would be able to ignore it? At this time, it was not only the ordinary Tatar cavalrymen. Some of the Tatar centurions and Kiliarchs were also tempted. Gu Shan had just said that an ordinary soldier's monthly salary was at least 10 taels of silver. As a small general, they would receive even more. If they followed this treatment and worked in the mercenary army for a few years, wouldn't they have enough money to marry a wife, build a house, and buy sheep and horses? If they really had money and a happy and comfortable life, who would want to go to war and take risks? Gu Shan's appearance made many people have a better understanding of the mercenary army and yearn for it. In the following time, more Tatar cavalrymen like Gu Shan who had been treated with minor injuries were released. They came to the center of the two armies and began to help spread the benefits of the mercenary army. One person's words might not be credible, but what about 10 people, 100 people, or more? Not to mention that the original words were true, with so many people saying the same thing. Even if it was false, it would become true. As more and more of their original companions came forward to speak, gradually, no one doubted the truth of the matter. On the contrary, everyone's eyes were full of stars, imagining the various benefits after joining the mercenary army. Gu Shan and the others were sent out because they had received a certain promise from the mercenary army. For example, the so-called Mercenary Logistics Battalion commander Beta Persei, who was in charge of receiving them, said that as long as they helped persuade the Tatar cavalrymen, once they chose to surrender, not only would they receive a reward of 100 taels of silver for their military service, but after their injuries were healed, their ability would be tested first and they would be able to enter the corps. Even if it was for themselves, Gu Shan and the others would go all out and do their best to praise the mercenary army to the best of their ability. Their efforts finally paid off. Under the extreme temptation of words, finally a bold Tatar cavalryman walked out of the camp and came to the center of the two armies, expressing his willingness to surrender to the mercenary army. His appearance was naturally welcomed by Gu Shan and the others. In the warm applause, the mercenary army also sent out 2 battalions of soldiers to welcome him. Immediately, a special person came forward to register. The officer in charge of the reception also praised the Tatar cavalryman for daring to be the first to come forward. He said that if this person performed well, he would be given more consideration for his promotion. With such a living example in front of them, the other Tatar cavalrymen finally couldn't help but take the initiative to stand out. They scrambled to be the first, as if they were afraid that all the benefits would be taken away by others if they were late. More and more Tatar cavalrymen chose to surrender. They put down their weapons, jumped off their horses, and joined the mercenary army. Because of this, the tension of the previous war slowly disappeared. So much so that the originally tense string was also relaxed. There were also examples of centurions and Kiliarchs joining the mercenary army. In the main camp of the Tatar cavalry, Suhi stood at the entrance of the large tent. He looked at everything that was happening in front of him from afar and was speechless for a long time. There was no expression on his face. He couldn't tell if he was happy or disappointed. Suhi's mood was indeed a bit complicated. You could say that he was happy. So many of his brothers had a way to live, so he was naturally happy. But at the same time, He was worried that the mercenary army would not treat his brothers well. Since they had surrendered, it was the same as fish on the chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. If all of this was fake, then what should he do? Under such a worried mood, Gu Shan, who had done his best to talk, crossed the line between the two armies and arrived in front of Su He. This was deliberately requested by Su He. He wanted to contact Gu Shan alone and use his experience to judge whether what Gu Shan said was true or false. Seeing that Gu Shan had arrived, he calmly turned around and walked into the large tent. He spat out a sentence. "Come with me." Gu Shan was naturally cautious and even a little nervous. After all, he was just an ordinary Tatar cavalryman. It was impossible for him to meet a general like Su He who commanded tens of thousands of troops. But now they could actually meet alone. It was imaginable how his mentality had changed. As soon as he entered the tent, it was incomparably cold. Su He turned his head and said casually, "Sit anywhere." "Thank you, General. I'm used to standing." Gu Shan was still very aware of his identity. He didn't sit down but stood respectfully at the side. Su He saw Gu Shan's performance, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he sat down and asked casually, "Tell me everything you saw after going to the mercenary camp and the benefits they promised you. Remember, don't lie. If I find out, you'll never be able to walk out of this tent." There wasn't the slightest anger in his voice, and there wasn't even the slightest murderous intent. However, these words brought a lot of pressure to Gu Shan, so much so that he suddenly broke out in cold sweat. It also gave him a feeling that it was best not to lie in front of General Su He. Otherwise, he would definitely lose his life here. Chapter 721. "Yes, General, I will report truthfully," Gu Shan said very sincerely. Then he recounted everything that happened when he entered the mercenary camp in detail. He even told Beta Persei about the things that he promised him. "General, I didn't say a single lie. Everything I said is true. I also saw our mercenary Tatar soldiers in the previous battle in the barracks. Most of them were treated well. Although they were locked in military tents, they were not beaten, scolded, or reprimanded. They even had a fixed time to come out every day. And once some of them were willing to surrender, they would immediately be separated and receive better treatment. Even those soldiers who did not make a choice for the time being would be able to eat their fill for 3 meals and would not go hungry." Su He nodded from time to time as he listened carefully to Gu Shan's detailed account of everything he saw. He could feel that Gu Shan was not lying. He had interrupted several times and then asked the previous questions again. The answers he got were the same. There was no difference. He learned more about the mercenary army from Gu Shan's mouth. He also knew that his soldiers were doing well. He could finally rest assured. He slowly closed his eyes, then waved his hand and said, "Very good, thank you for telling me so much. You can leave now." Gu Shan, who could leave, did not immediately move. Instead, he took the initiative to say after struggling in his heart, "General, don't you choose to join the mercenary army? They are indeed treated well, and their mental outlook is not worse than our Tatar cavalry." "He, don't say any more. Otherwise, you will only force me to change my mind about not killing you. You can leave now." Although he did not say anything more, Su He had already expressed his determination with practical actions. That is, others can surrender, but he will not. No matter what, he was a general who once commanded tens of thousands of cavalry. How could he choose to surrender in exchange for a new life? At this point, Su He was about to get angry. By right, this should be the time for Gu Shan to leave. However, he still didn't move. Instead, after a moment of hesitation, he suddenly said, "General, the mercenaries hope to see you join them. They even promised you the opportunity to lead an army alone after you join them. He also said that if you don't go, young Master Haraluo's life will be in danger." Listening to Gu Shan's noisy words, Su He was about to get angry. Was his expression not clear and specific enough? Why was the other party still trying to persuade him? He had to show the other party some power. Just as he was about to punish Gu Shan, he suddenly heard the last sentence. When he heard Hararuo's name, his originally closed eyes suddenly opened. "What did you say? If Harak is still alive, how is he now?" Su He finally reacted, which made Gu Shan breathe a sigh of relief. Before coming, Beta Persei told him that if possible, he could help persuade Suhi. For this, he even wrote him a letter. But Beta Persei also said that this mission could be abandoned. After all, it was too dangerous. No one would blame him if he didn't complete it. Of course, if he completed it well, there would be additional rewards and so on. On the way to see Suhi, Gu Shan thought a lot. In the end, he decided to give it a try. This was not only because of the generous rewards, but also because of a more important reason. He respected General Suhi very much and didn't want to see the general die because he didn't surrender. So he finally mustered up the courage to give it a try. Now, it seems that he finally made the right bet. Gu Shan happily took out the letter from his arms and handed it to Suhi. General, this is a letter from the mercenary general. There should be the answer you want in it. Take a look. Suhi didn't hesitate to take the letter, then opened it and read it. He finally knew what happened at Xianxia and the North Slope. It was as he expected and guessed. Whether it was the 5,000 Tatar cavalry at Xianxia or the 10,000 Tatar cavalry at the North Slope, they were all defeated. The defeat was very thorough. General Gulang, who was in charge of the North Slope, was killed in the chaos. Harak, who led the 5,000 Xianxia cavalry, was lucky and was captured alive. Now he was in the hands of the mercenaries, who originally wanted to kill him. But if Suhi was willing to surrender, this person would not die. This was the promise of the mercenary leader, the great Ming dynasty's loyalty and courage. It also expressed the other party's importance to him. At the end of the letter, there was also Yang Qindong's handwriting. General Suhi, I have long heard of your ability to command troops. I look forward to it. If you are willing to return, you will be put in an important position. The great Ming dynasty's loyalty and courage is a great promise. Just this line of words in Suhi's eyes was as heavy as 10,000 kilograms. It made Suhi feel touched. The fact that the other party was trying so hard to subdue him made him feel a little happy in his heart. A good bird chooses a good tree to nest in. Any capable person would want to find a wise master. Only in this way would they not bury their talents. Suhi also had a great dream in his heart. That was to rule the entire grassland like his predecessor, the greatest hero in his heart, Genghis Khan. Then, he would let the Mongolian cavalry conquer the world and achieve supreme hegemony. Unfortunately, this dream was completely lost because he followed Agadorji. This was a greedy person, a short-sighted person. As long as he could eat his fill, wear warm clothes, and have enough power, he would stop moving forward. If he followed such a person, he might be able to barely survive, but it was obviously impossible to achieve great things. If the other party did not promote him and put him in an important position, Suhi would have left long ago. He originally thought that he would not have the chance to fulfill his wish in this life. But now, the opportunity was in front of him again. The Duke of Loyalty and Courage, the legendary war god, who could easily defeat Yes Hen, had extended an olive branch to him. How could he not be excited? But sometimes, being excited was not enough. What really moved Suhi was that as long as he chose to surrender, he could save Hara Ruoxian's life. This hit his heart, making him enter into a situation where he had no choice. Without Agadorji's attention and promotion, Suhi would not be where he was today. In order to repay the favor, he risked his life to let the other party leave. Logically speaking, he had already repaid the favor. But this didn't seem to be enough. He didn't just want to call it even. He also wanted the other party to owe him a favor. This way, no matter who talked about this matter in the future, they wouldn't blame him anymore. And if he could save Hara Ruoxian, it would be equivalent to making Agadorji owe him a big favor. That would be perfect. Is Hara Ruoxian still alive? I want to see him before making a decision. Although Suhi was already moved, he did not show it. Instead, he said very calmly, "Yes, I will pass on the general's request to the mercenary general. You just have to wait for the news." Gu Shan naturally could not make any promises. He also did not have the authority to do so. All he could do was to pass on the original words. "Okay, I will give us 2 days. If we still do not see Hara Ruoxian in 2 days, then you are deceiving me. At that time, even if I have to risk my life, I will fight you to the end." Suhi's voice became cold, releasing a murderous aura. Yes. Gu Shan was affected. After hurriedly agreeing, he left the tent. Not long after, this news was passed back to the mercenary camp. Regarding Suhi's request, the officers below had different opinions. Someone suggested that Hara Ruoxian could not be handed over. This person had previously had unfavorable thoughts towards the sixth young master, and even fought a big battle at the short stone pile. He was also Agadorji's only son. This person could not be let go and should be killed. Moreover, the other party was not surrounded. The news said that at least 6,000 Tatar cavalry had escaped. It was hard to guarantee that they would not become a threat in the future. As soon as this idea was put forward, it received a lot of support. Everyone thought that it was not worth it to let go of Hara Ruoxiu for the sake of Suhi, a loser. With so many people supporting this idea, the voices of quarreling in the tent quickly disappeared. After reaching a consensus, everyone's eyes fell on Yang Chendong, who had been sitting at the head of the tent without speaking. 1,000 soldiers are easy to obtain, but a general is difficult to find. You must have all heard of it. With a smile on his face, Yang Chendong's eyes swept across the faces of the officers in the tent. Suhi's ability is obvious to all of you. Let me ask everyone a question. In front of the mercenaries, if you were to command the Tatar cavalry, can you guarantee that you would do better than Suhi? Yang Chendong didn't go to talk about any great principles. Instead, he used facts to speak. Just a question was thrown out, and the tent immediately became silent. They asked themselves, unless they knew all of the sixth young master's plans, and if they worked together, they might have a chance of winning. Otherwise, they would not be able to win this battle. It could be said that the moment the Tatar cavalry became enemies with the mercenaries, they had already lost. Haha, I know that many of you look down on the general of a defeated army. But what I want to say is that defeat is not the fault of the general. Whoever commands this army will have the same result. So why should you look down on Suhi? As for defeats, most of you have experienced them before, right? When have I ever looked at you in a different light? When this question was asked, many of the faces in the tent became red. This was especially true for Yella and Lu Dai, who were the commander of the Jurchen cavalry division. Their faces were flushed red. Weren't they the general of a defeated army? It was because of their ability that they were chosen by Yang Chendong and placed in an important position. Chapter 722. Even if he was such a person, what qualifications did he have to look down on others? Everyone stopped talking. Yang Chendong smiled and said, As for Haraluo, a dead person has no value. If we can use a person who is already dead in our eyes in exchange for Suhi's sincere surrender, it is worth it. Don't you think so? This time, no one said anything. This was not only because Yang Chendong's prestige was too high, to the point that his words carried enormous weight. More importantly, what he said was indeed very reasonable, making it difficult for everyone to find a place to refute. Because Yang Chendong expressed his opinion, the matter was settled. He immediately let the scouts return to the first city and bring Haraluo to the battlefield. Yang Chendong also made the decision to go to the Tatar cavalry army to see Suhi personally. Naturally, some people showed concerns about this decision, but Yang Chendong said that he had confidence in the Black Knights. In addition, the mercenaries could press to the front line. Once they found that the situation was not right, they could immediately launch a general attack. Finally, the other officers could not say anything. The scout left quickly and returned quickly as well. After only a day and a half, Haraluo was brought in front of Yang Chendong. Compared to the last time they met, this person was slightly embarrassed. It should be because he had not washed his face for a few days. He gave people the feeling that he was very listless. Come, fetch water for him to wash his face and get him a set of clean clothes to change into. Yang Chendong just casually glanced at Haraluo, then looked away. If such a small person was not still useful now, perhaps he would not take a second look at him in his life. Haraluo was taken away. When he followed Yang Chendong and the 100 or so black-clad knights out of the mercenary camp, it was as if he had changed into a different person. He was much more energetic. Although his appearance had recovered a lot, it could still be seen from his constantly moving eyes that he was still very afraid at this moment. After becoming a captive, he no longer knew what his future path was. He didn't even know when he would die. Under this shadow, he didn't dare to say anything. Once he noticed that the surrounding black-clad soldiers were looking at him, he tried his best to put on a flattering smile to curry favor. To Haraluo's horror, he was surprised to find that after leaving the mercenary camp, They were actually heading towards the Tatar army. He carefully looked at the Black Knights beside him. There were only a little more than 100 of them. He really couldn't understand. Would such a small number of people really dare to bring him to the Tatar cavalry's camp? Could this be the so-called boldness of the skilled? While thinking, Yang Qindong led more than 100 Black Knights through the ceasefire battlefield, heading straight for the Tatar camp. Along the way, they saw many Tatar cavalry who were hesitating whether to surrender or not. When they saw Yang Qindong and the 100 Black Knights, their eyes were also filled with shock and confusion. In front of the largest tent in the Tatar cavalry's camp, Suhi stood to welcome them. When he saw the Black Knights coming from afar and Hilaruo in the group, his face didn't change, but his heart was really shocked. The mercenaries really did send Hilaruo over. They really kept their word. Everyone, since you are here, why don't you take a seat in the main tent? In the spirit of hospitality, and also wanting to test the other party, Suhi made an invitation. Of course, he also wanted to test them. He wanted to see if the mercenaries were really so bold, and if they had the courage to do so. Of course. The one who answered him was Yang Qindong, riding the white dragon horse at the head of the group. Along the way, he didn't panic, as if he was walking in his own camp. He didn't show the slightest sign of weakness. On the contrary, when he came in front of Suhi, his eyes were still constantly looking at this person, as if he was looking at a treasure. Yang Qindong, who agreed, dismounted from his horse and led Beta Persei and Qiu Vi, as well as Ba Daojiang and Pang Yu, who were escorting Hilaruo, and strode into the tent. As soon as they entered the tent, they could see that both sides of the tent were filled with executioners holding swords and sabers. There were about 50 of them. They were glaring angrily at Yang Qindong and the others who came in. It was as if they would chop the intruders into minced meat at the slightest command. You are cheating, how dare you? After Beta Persei and Qiu Vi saw the situation in front of them, they stood on the left and right respectively and pulled out their sabers. Their eyes were filled with anger and killing intent. On the other hand, Yang Qindong wasn't confused by the scene in front of him. Instead, he smiled and looked at Suhi, who had already walked to the front and was 3 meters away from him. He asked, "Is this how you treat your guests?" At this time, Yang Qindong not only showed that he wasn't afraid, but in fact, he really wasn't. Hilaruo was still in his hands and hadn't been handed over to the other party yet. Just based on this, the other party didn't dare to act rashly. According to his analysis, the reason why they put on such a posture was just to scare him. While Yang Qindong was speaking, Ba Daojiang and Pang Yu also tightened their grip on the sabers in their hands. The sabers were placed on Hilaruo's neck. It seemed that this movement would draw blood, causing Hilaruo to cry out in alarm. Suhi, don't act rashly, don't act rashly. Instead of scaring the others, Suhi scared his own people. There was a trace of disappointment in his eyes. Then he waved his hand, and the 50 axemen took a step back in unison, maintaining a safe distance from Yang Qindong and the others. After expressing a certain amount of goodwill, Suhi looked at Yang Qindong and asked, "Can you let them go now?" Logically speaking, the danger wasn't over yet. Letting them go now was equivalent to putting themselves in danger. If it was anyone else, they wouldn't agree so easily. However, Yang Qindong wasn't an ordinary person. 50 axemen wasn't a small number, but it wasn't a big deal in his eyes. The 4 men he brought with him could each fight against 10 men, and his own strength was unfathomable. Outside the tent, Dao Shao was leading more than 100 Black Knights. It was impossible for them to fend off an army of 10,000, but it would not be a problem for them to fend them off for a while. Once chaos broke out here, the mercenaries outside would charge in. These were the reasons why he was so confident. Because of this, after hearing Suhi's question, Yang Qindong smiled. "Of course we can let them go. I originally wanted to give them to you. Come, let young Master Hilaruo go." Ba Daojiang and Pang Yu were stunned for a moment. However, this was the 6th young master's order. Although the 2 of them were reluctant, they still put down their sabers and pushed Hilaruo to Suhi's side. This action also gave Suhi a fright. What he said just now was just to test the waters. If the other party didn't let him go, he would definitely mock them and point out that the mercenaries were also as timid as mice. He could use this opportunity to suppress the other party's momentum. But now, the other party really let them go. Just this magnanimity and boldness made him speechless. Suhi didn't know what to say. Hilaruo, who was released, finally regained his freedom. He suddenly shouted, "General Su, quickly capture these people. Their status isn't low. We can threaten them to make the mercenaries pay the price." Along the way, although he didn't know Yang Chendong's true identity, he had met him twice. In addition, when he left the mercenaries' camp, he could see that many people looked at Yang Chendong with very respectful gazes. Just based on this, he guessed that this person's status wasn't ordinary. Thus, he shouted loudly. At this moment, Hilaruo's style of being an ingrate was incisively and vividly displayed. These words also made the surrounding 50 executioners move. Just now, the other party had hostages in their hands, so they didn't dare to act rashly. But now the enemy had nothing, so they didn't put him in their eyes. Hilaruo's shout also made Beta Persei, Chio V, and the other two become very nervous. The four of them even involuntarily touched their waists. They all came with pistols. If the situation goes out of control, they will pull out their guns and kill. However, Yang Chendong still didn't panic. Instead, he looked at Su He and smiled, as if to tell everyone that he was not an enemy, but a friend. Su He was also one of the calmer people. At least he didn't shout, nor did he have the intention to order the arrest. Instead, he looked at Yang Chendong, his eyes full of curiosity. "But I don't know who you are?" Seeing Yang Chendong's calmness, and also seeing that this person was the leader of the Black Knights, Su He was indeed interested. This person's boldness and courage were something he had never seen in his life. With this alone, this person was worthy of respect. "What? General Su, you really don't know who I am?" "Well, I will tell you, listen carefully. I am the great Ming's loyal duke, the one you call the war god." With a smile still on his face, Yang Chendong revealed his identity word by word. "Loyal duke? War god." The moment the name was said, not only Su He, but also the 50 executioners involuntarily took a step back, their faces showing a look of horror. What was the meaning of a person's name, the shadow of a tree, was perfectly interpreted at this time. After a brief panic, everyone carefully looked at Yang Chendong. After all, it wasn't the first time they heard the name of the war god, but it was rumored that this person had 3 heads and 6 arms and was 3 feet tall. But now, looking at him, he was the same as them, but younger and more handsome. You are the war god?" Su He asked in disbelief. "It's true. And when you go to the mercenary army in the future, you will naturally know that I am not lying," Yang Chendong said with a smile, almost patting his chest and taking out his ID card as proof. Chapter 723. It really was the war god. Su He was truly excited. The true men of the grasslands all worshipped heroes. Without a doubt, the war god who could defeat the Walla's leader, Yes Hen, naturally belonged to the category of heroes. In the past, they had only heard of his name. Now that they had finally seen him in person, how could they not be excited? Not to mention, the war god was now the commander of the mercenaries. He could even decide the life and death of many of them. Of course, what made Su He even more excited was that this person actually came to her in person, and he just wanted to recruit her. At that moment, he felt that he was extremely valued. That feeling was very good and made him feel very comfortable. Hilaruo was also frightened by the war god's name. But soon, his eyes shone with excitement. This was the war god, someone who even Yes Hen was afraid of. If he could capture this person and give him to Yes Hen, he would definitely be able to exchange for a lot of good things. At that time, wouldn't he gain both fame and fortune? His faction would also have a great opportunity to develop. He would also be regarded as a hero by the grasslands warriors. Thinking about the various benefits he could obtain, Hilaruo couldn't suppress the excitement in his heart. He shouted at the executioners in the tent, "What are you all standing there for? Hurry up and capture him. This is a great contribution." His voice was shouted out, and the crowd of executioners were also moved. But no one moved. Instead, they all looked at Su He. Su He was the commander here. They could only listen to his orders. Seeing that no one moved and instead looked at Su He, Hilaruo was unhappy. He said with a dark face, "Did you not hear what I said? Let me tell you, if you don't listen, I will hand you over to my father. At that time, even Su He won't be able to protect you." Poor Hilaruo, He still didn't know that his father had already escaped with 3,000 cavalry. He thought that no one could stop him from doing anything with his father's name. Haraluo had exposed his true face. This made Su He very unhappy. The war god was willing to take the risk alone. This was a display of courage and wisdom, but how could it not be that he trusted himself? Although he also wanted to defeat the battle god, that would bring him both fame and fortune. However, if he wanted to defeat them, he would have to defeat them fair and square on the battlefield. He would not have to resort to petty tricks and use the other party's trust to make a move. If he did that, he would not be a hero. In fact, he would be worse than a coward. That's enough. Suddenly, Su He roared and stopped Hararuo's shouting. He then cupped his fists and said to Yang Chendong, "So it's the battle god. Sorry for the disrespect." He. Yang Chendong was very satisfied with Su He's performance. The fact that the other party didn't make a move was enough to prove that he was a straightforward and upright man. Such a person was always worthy of others' trust. He smiled and said, "It's fine. I've admired General Su's talent for a long time. How about it? You gave me the conditions to send Halaruo back. Not only did I send him back, but I also appeared here personally. Does this count as showing enough sincerity?" He took the opportunity to state his purpose. These words caused Su He's face to turn red. If he had only wanted to test the sincerity of the mercenaries before, the other party's performance was too good. It was so good that he had nothing to say. As a man, once a promise is made, even 4 horses cannot go back on it. Su He was moved by Yang Chendong's sincerity. He immediately cupped his fists and said, "Battle god, I, Su He, am very difficult to convince others, but I truly submit to you. From now on, Su He is willing to serve by your side. Please accept me." As he spoke, he knelt on the ground. Su He finally lowered his head. "Ha ha ha, good. Yang Chendong was naturally overjoyed. He laughed and took a few steps forward. He came in front of Su He and reached out to help him up. Then the monarch and minister looked at each other and smiled. Everything was understood without words. Su He expressed his intention to surrender. This scared Halaruo. Instead of his overbearing attitude, he stood obediently at the side like a cat. When he noticed Yang Chendong's gaze, he even tried his best to squeeze out a smile. He didn't even think about how he wanted to kill Yang Chendong just now. Yang Chendong did not even spare him a second glance. Such a person was not worthy of his attention. Yang Chendong did not even spare him a second glance. If it wasn't for the fact that he wanted Su He to join the mercenaries, this person would have died countless times. Yang Chendong could ignore Halaruo, but Su He couldn't. With the intention of returning the favor, he first glanced at Haraluoku, then at Yang Chendong and said, "War god, this subordinate has a presumptuous request, but I don't know if I can say it." "There's no harm in saying it," Yang Chendong said very generously. "This subordinate wants to send Halaruo away. If other Tatar cavalry are willing to follow, please don't stop them. As for the rest, this subordinate will try my best to persuade them to work for the mercenaries. Please allow it." This was equivalent to the last condition. It was also Su He's end to some things. Since he had already done so many things, there was no harm in doing one more. Yang Chendong immediately nodded and said, "Okay, I promise you." "Thank you, war god." Su He's attitude was already very respectful. After he finally made his choice, he relaxed a lot. In front of the big tent, more than 100 black-clad cavalry rode on horses. They wore black iron masks, so people couldn't see their expressions at all. However, a solemn murderous aura leaked out uncontrollably. The Tatar cavalry who wanted to watch could only watch from afar. Time passed by minute. The 6th young master still hadn't come out. Fortunately, there were no sounds of fighting coming out of the big tent. But before there was a result, all the black-clad cavalry maintained their best state. They looked like they would pull out their swords and open fire once the order was given. In fact, they didn't just pull out their swords. Therefore, the black-clad cavalry carried a Type 95 on their back. Everyone's body was full of magazines. Even the quiver was full of grenades. This was just in case. Just when the tension was so high that a random sound could lead to a chaotic battle, the curtain of the big tent was finally lifted from the inside. Yang Chendong, wearing a red cloak, strode out. Beside Yang Chendong were Beta Persei, Chiu Vi, and the others. Compared to when he went in, there was one more person beside him, Su He. It could be seen that the other party intentionally stood behind Yang Chendong, and he even showed a very respectful look. After walking out, Yang Chendong first nodded lightly to Dao Xiao and the other guards to show that he was fine. Then, he turned to look at Su He and said, "You may begin." "Yes." Su He cupped his fists and answered. Then, he strode away from Yang Chendong's side and walked to a place about 10 meters away from the big tent. Then, he jumped onto a warhorse and shouted from above, "Everyone pay attention. Gather here. This general has an important matter to announce." At this time, the Tatar camp had experienced a few battles. After sending away all the wounded and a portion of people who had chosen to surrender, there were still about 7,000 people in the camp. With so many people gathered together, the momentum was still very great. Fortunately, they were worthy of being called an elite army. Even when they gathered, they were very orderly. No one panicked. Everyone stood in an orderly manner, either close or far away. However, their eyes were all on Su He, waiting for the general's next order. After about the time it took for an incense stick to burn, the camp was once again safe. There were already very few people who continued to walk around. Su He's shout finally rang out, and that resounding voice also reached the ears of every soldier. "I am Su He. I have already made the decision to surrender and join the mercenary army. Brothers, if you believe in me, then please join me for a brand new beginning." The crowd was silent at first, but then there was a deafening shout. It was clear that this decision was very popular with the soldiers. Many people were already moved, but because there were still many people who had not made a choice, they could not force themselves to stand out. Thus they endured it. Now that even the general had decided to surrender to the mercenary army, they finally had nothing to worry about. The shouts came one after another, and it took a while for them to gradually calm down. Su He's voice continued to ring out, "Young Master Haruo has already been sent back. If anyone is willing to follow young Master, I will not stop or oppose. You can leave with him. Those who do not wish to join the mercenary army can also leave with young Master first. When you feel that it is safe or the time is ripe, you can leave on your own. From now on, everyone will go their separate ways. However, if one day we meet on the battlefield, we will definitely not be lenient. I hope that everyone can understand, and I also hope that those who leave will take care of themselves." He had given everyone another choice. He had spoken very gently at the beginning, but at the end, he had said such a sentence, which was full of threat. When these words entered the ears of the army, it indeed caused the faces of those who had ulterior motives to tighten. They had no choice but to think about it. If they really left, where would they go in the future? Moreover, the strength of the mercenary army was so strong. If they were to become enemies, would they be able to win? To put it simply, would they have a chance to survive? Yang Chendong heard Su He's words and laughed in his heart. This person really did have some tricks up his sleeve. It was clearly a threat, but he used such a method to make it seem as if he was thinking for everyone. This was indeed a talent. At this point, Yang Chendong was no longer worried about the choice of the Tatar cavalry. With Su He, this powerful general, he would definitely be satisfied with the result. In order to not create pressure for the other party and be able to do things freely, Yang Chendong left with more than 100 black-armored cavalry. Chapter 724. Not long after Yang Chendong left, Har also left the Tatar camp. Nearly 1,000 Tatar cavalrymen left with him. About 200 of them had received Lord Agar Dorj's kindness, and they were following the young master to repay his kindness. As for the rest, they did not want to join the Han army, or they were simply tired of war. Su He kept his word and did not make things difficult for them. Instead, he allowed them to take their war horses and weapons and leave the camp. However, if one day these people could not continue and wanted to return, they would have to start all over again. A day later, Su He brought about 6,000 Tatar cavalrymen and joined the mercenary army. At this point, the battle had come to an end. After several bloody battles, 8,000 of the 45,000 Tatar cavalrymen were killed and nearly 20,000 were wounded. Nearly 7,000 managed to escape, and in the end, more than 10,000 were captured or surrendered. On the other hand, The mercenary army had about 2,500 people who died or were seriously injured and could not return to the army. There were still more than 2,000 lightly wounded soldiers left behind. This was a great victory for them, no matter how one looked at it. Yang Qindong did not go back on his word and allowed his 4 regiments to replenish the soldiers from the captives and surrendered soldiers. After this was done, he selected some elite soldiers from the remaining Tatar cavalrymen to form a new Tatar cavalry regiment. The regiment commander was Su He, and the number of soldiers was the same as the Nuzan cavalry regiment, 3,000. As for the remaining soldiers, they were incorporated into the newly expanded logistics regiment to replenish the soldiers. First city. News of the battle outside continued to pour into the city. The biggest change was that one could see captured Tatar cavalrymen and injured Tatar cavalrymen being sent into the city almost every day. Every time they appeared, the people in the city would talk about it. Although the citizens of the city weren't very sure about the number of mercenaries, they knew that there were about 10,000 to less than 20,000 mercenaries. Facing 45,000 elite Tatar cavalrymen with less than 20,000 people, many people were worried at the beginning. After all, the difference in strength was too great. Even if some people had seen the mercenaries' training methods, they still did not think that it would be easy for them to win. However, just as most people were not optimistic about their chances, reports of victory were sent into the city again and again. Under intentional propaganda, the more than 10,000 people in the city were clearly aware of the situation at the front lines, as well as how much the mercenaries had obtained in each battle. Seeing that they had won one battle after another, the people in the city were encouraged. They had more confidence in the mercenaries and were more determined to live in the city. Of course, there were 2 sides to everything. Some people were happy while others were unhappy. For example, some of the grassland youths in the city who wanted to join the mercenary army. They thought that if the front line was tight, they would have a chance to quickly rise and become a member of the mercenary army. However, news of victory kept coming in, especially when a large number of captives and wounded were sent into the city and passed through the streets in front of them. They couldn't help but start to worry. With so many captives, would the mercenaries choose to conscript? Would they still have a chance to join the army and create a better future? Amidst such worries, even better news came. Agar Dorj escaped, and the Tatar army was defeated. General Su He finally chose to surrender and joined the mercenary army. The beginning city was safe. It was safe. When this news spread to the city, many people went to the streets to celebrate. Only those ambitious young men who wanted to join the army were missing. They were afraid that they had no hope. After understanding the treatment of the mercenaries, the thing they yearned for the most was to join this army. At the same time, they could also earn a better tomorrow for themselves. After discussing, they gathered together and decided in private that when the god of war returned from the front line, they would jointly request to join the mercenary army and ask the god of war to give them an explanation and a chance. Because so many people gathered, such a matter could not be hidden from the members of the security bureau in the city. At first, they thought that something big was going to happen. However, after understanding the matter, they did not know whether to laugh or cry. In the end, they reported the matter to the director of the security bureau in the beginning city, who was also in charge of intelligence in the grassland, Feng Liang. Feng Liang was one of the old people in the security bureau. When it was first established, he was chosen by the director, Yang San, and transferred to his command. Facts also proved that Director Yang San's judgment of people was still very accurate. Feng Liang withstood strict training, and after becoming an official member, he performed well and completed several difficult jobs in succession. Finally, he became a marquis and the person in charge of the security bureau in the grassland. This time, the beginning city was newly built, so it naturally needed some elite soldiers to assist. Feng Liang came here again and was responsible for the intelligence and security work in the city. He had also spent a lot of time walking through the streets and alleys of the beginning city. He knew the situation and terrain of the city like the back of his hand. Under Feng Liang's efforts, the security bureau in the city was successfully established. Its members were scattered all over the city to ensure that no matter what happened, no one would be able to escape their eyes. This time, so many young and strong grassland men suddenly gathered together. How could they escape his eyes and ears? He hurriedly sent people to inquire about and understand the situation. In the end, he got such a result, which made him feel like he did not know what to say. Logically speaking, it was a good thing that the young man wanted to join the army. At least it proved that the army was popular. This was what many forces and armies wanted to see. However, the mercenary army paid attention to the elite route of a strong army. The sixth young master personally said that he did not ask for the number of mercenaries. He only needed them to have enough combat power. Only in this way would the treatment of soldiers be higher, and they would be more flexible and mobile in the war. As a result, the pressure on the logistical support would also be much less. The route of a strong army had proven its feasibility with facts. Since the establishment of the mercenary army, which time did they not win with fewer people? It was also because of the small number of troops that they were more flexible and mobile when they fought the war. Feng Liang, who understood this policy very well, could understand the feelings of these young and strong grassland men. He could also feel the benefits of the sixth young master's policy. For a moment, he was caught in a dilemma. Since he knew what the request of these young and strong men was, there was no need to let them meet the sixth young master. This kind of small matter could be solved by him. How about this? Choose a few representatives from these young men who want to join the army. I will meet them alone. After some consideration, Feng Liang came up with a solution. That was to use the militia to solve the problem at hand. This way, they would not need to take up the quota and resources of the mercenary army. It should be the best of both worlds. All they needed to do was to pay a certain amount of silver every month. In order to build an intelligence network, the thing that the Security Bureau did not lack the least was silver. This amount of silver was still something they could solve. Feng Liang made a decision. He even imitated the model of establishing the militia and reserve in Xianxia city. This solution was indeed effective. After meeting the representatives in private, the two sides reached an agreement to allow these men to enter the ranks of the militia of the first city. As long as they had the opportunity to pass the assessment, they would be able to enter the regular frontline combat forces. Before that, what they needed to do was to be responsible for the security in the beginning city. Once they found any suspicious people, they could keep an eye on them. If necessary, they could inform the army in the city and cooperate with them to suppress the enemy. After doing this, not only could they get a reasonable name for law enforcement, but more importantly, they could also get some silver every month. It was tentatively set at 2 taels of silver every month. There would be an additional reward for meritorious service. 2 taels of silver was naturally nothing in front of the regular mercenary army. However, for ordinary people it was already an income. At this moment, both sides were very satisfied. A gathering of people that needed to trouble Yang Chendong was declared over before it happened. What was even more unexpected was that it did not take long for these grassland men, who were persuaded by Feng Liang to join the militia, to really make a great contribution. Yang Chendong, who had safely returned to the city, did not know about everything that Feng Liang had done in private. However, these things would be formed into a secret document and sent to him for review. However, no one knew whether he would value it or not. For example, Yang Chendong did not pay attention to the matter reported by Feng Liang. Instead, he focused on the eastern area of the beginning city. The scouts had sent back news that the 3 divisions of the Lung Feng division were already on their way to transport the goods from Xianxia city that had just been received from Sea Town. They would be able to rush back to the beginning city in at most 2 days. The previous battle was just to establish his prestige and to stabilize his foothold. Now, it seemed that everything was going smoothly. After this battle, not only did he show his prestige, but he also strengthened the army. This also gave Yang Chendong more confidence. Whether it was to defend the city or to fight, he also had more choices. However, if one wanted to conquer a place, war was only one of the methods. Another important method was economic occupation. As long as one controlled the economy of a place, it was equivalent to controlling its artery. Only then would one's influence be more far-reaching and one would be more powerful. Among the goods transported by the 3 divisions of the Lung Feng division, there were many goods that were hard currencies. This was also a good opportunity to strengthen the economic strength of the beginning city again. This was also something that Yang Chendong valued very much. Therefore, on the morning of the 3rd day, when the 3 divisions of the Lung Feng division escorted more than 500 carriages and appeared outside the city, he personally went up to greet them. While thanking them for their hard work, he also listened to the work reports from Division Commander Wu Shang and Political Commissar Chen Bo. Chapter 725. Ever since they left the first city and headed to the new Ergon city, They had openly raised the banner of the mercenary army. At the same time, they attracted the attention of the Baiming guards. Then, at the downstream of the Songhua River, outside the Jianghu left guard, they had a big battle with the 3,000 cavalrymen of the Baiming guards and won a great victory. They had made a great contribution in this battle, and because of this, they gained the name of the mercenary army. The Baiming guards became more honest, and a logistics route that belonged to the mercenary army was opened up. On the way back from Sea Town to pick up the goods, there were no more Ming army soldiers to make things difficult for them. There were only some scouts following them from afar, inquiring about their situation. Good. Hearing that he had established his prestige with just one battle, Yang Qindong was naturally satisfied. The Ming army was mostly made up of Han people. This was his route. If he could avoid hurting them, it would be best not to hurt them. As long as the other party was honest, he did not mind creating a peaceful border for them. As for who wanted to attack the Han people, he would take care of it. Of course, if the Ming army was smart, things would naturally develop normally. If they wanted to make things difficult for the mercenaries, he would not introduce them to teach them a lesson. He would let them know who they could not afford to offend and who they could not have any ideas about. The 3 divisions of Lung Feng had returned. They escorted more than 500 carriages of various sizes and a large number of goods. Since these were things that Yang Qindong needed, Crimson City would naturally provide them with all their strength. There were food, drinks, clothes, and all kinds of things. It could be said that they had everything. Not only did they bring a lot of goods this time, it was enough to make the first city a commercial city on the grasslands. At the same time, there was also a talent who came with the army. His surname was Yu and his name was Mian. His father was the first city lord of Crimson City, Lord Yu Qian. Yu Mian had a reputation in history, and his abilities were not ordinary. It was just that Yang Qindong did not appear, and in the end, Yu Qian ended up being beheaded. As his son, it was natural that he would not have a good ending. Now, things were different. Yu Qian was under the protection of Yang Qindong, and he had even handed over the management of such an important headquarter city to him. Naturally, his son would be able to do things much more smoothly. Yu Mian's arrival was not because his father, Yu Qian, wanted him to make his presence known. In fact, Yu Mian was already participating in the management of Crimson City. As the saying goes, one does not need to rely on one's own talents. Yu Qian was an upright gentleman. As long as he believed that something was right, he would not care about the opinions of others. Since his son was capable, why couldn't he be put in an important position? Yu Mian, who already had an official position in Crimson City and had begun to participate in the management, was summoned to Origin City after being recommended. This was Yang Qindong's order. Such a large city always needed someone to manage it, especially when it was just built. It could be said that there were a lot of things to do. If the person who came was not capable, wouldn't it be a waste of his energy? Finding a suitable city lord was a problem that Yang Qindong had been thinking about. He handed the matter of the candidates to Crimson City and asked them to report it. Among them was Yu Mian's name. In the end, he became the person that Yang Qindong wanted. When he saw Yu Mian, it was at the Yang residence in Origin City. The largest residence in this city was Yang Qindong's residence. In the pavilion in the back garden, Yang Qindong met Yu Mian, who was in his early 30s. The reason why he chose this place was to show his closeness. Only those who were chosen by Yang Qindong would be able to appear in such a private occasion. On the other hand, if it was someone unfamiliar, they could only meet in the living room. Yu Mian greets the 6th young master. After being brought to the back garden by Beta Persei, Yu Mian became excited when he saw the back of Yang Qindong, who was drinking tea alone from afar. He was still far away, but he had already bowed respectfully. "Haha, come have a seat." Yang Qindong laughed without even turning his head. Then, he waved his hand and greeted Yu Mian casually. The more casual he was with you, the more he expressed his trust in you. Yu Mian naturally walked to Yang Qindong's side with a look of fear and trepidation. Then, he nervously and carefully sat on the empty chair opposite him. One shouldn't think that Yu Mian's performance was exaggerated. But for those who lived in Crimson City, there was no one who didn't know Yang Qindong and the 6th young master. For example, Yu Qian was the first to be kidnapped, so he naturally had a conflict in his heart. Coupled with his feelings for the great Ming dynasty, it was basically impossible for him to work for other forces. Fortunately, Yang Chendong had never forced him. Otherwise, given Yu Qian's unyielding character, it would not be strange for him to commit suicide. He seemed to know what kind of person Yu Qian was, what kind of nature he had, and what kind of character he had. From the beginning, Yang Chendong did not intend to use force. He just let Yu Qian wander around the city. Then, under the influence of what he saw and heard, the environment really changed Yu Qian's mind. When he saw that Yang Chendong really wanted to change the people's lives, enrich the country and strengthen the people, and even create a dynasty that was more powerful than the Great Ming dynasty, his thoughts also changed little by little. During the day, he walked on the streets and observed his surroundings. He felt the vitality in Crimson City and the sincere and brilliant smiles on the faces of the people. At night, he tossed and turned in bed, unable to fall asleep. He thought about what kind of impact the development of Crimson City would have on the Great Ming dynasty and whether the development of such a city would be good or bad. Rather than saying that Yu Qian was loyal to the emperor of the Great Ming dynasty, it was better to say that he was loyal to the people of the Great Ming dynasty. By the same logic, he would help whoever could give the people a better life. After observing for many days, he confirmed that the development of Crimson City was for the good of the people. It could let them live a better life, obtain more respect, and obtain more fairness. He was surprised to find that this was not the life he wanted, the life and world he wanted, the life he had been pursuing all this time. In the end, reality defeated him and changed Yu Qian. He finally decided to use his own ability to do something for the city. Then, he was appointed to an important position and became the lord of a city. Facts also proved that he was indeed capable, not only in military matters, but also in the people's lives. After he was given great power, his performance would only improve. Facts further proved that Yang Chendong was right to put Yu Qian in an important position. Under his guidance, Crimson City entered an era of rapid development. With Yang Chendong's help in various aspects, it quickly became the largest city in the Yang dynasty. It created countless wealth for the development of the entire Yang dynasty, and laid a solid foundation. Yu Qian was contributing to the development of Crimson City. Of course, his family was duty-bound as well. At this time, Yu Mian also became an official and became a capable subordinate under his father. He was a capable assistant. His performance was also remarkable. In the end, he came to the first city and became the person personally appointed by Yang Chendong. At this time, Yu Mian sighed with emotion about his experience. He could also feel the great responsibility on his shoulders. He had even begun to outline the future development plan of the first city in his heart. He was thinking that he must build the first city into the second Crimson City and continue its glory. Compared to Yu Mian's nervousness and excitement, Yang Chendong was very calm. He did not talk about business right away. Instead, he casually asked about the matters in Crimson City, especially if the higher-ups and officials could fulfill their duties. Yu Mian, don't be nervous. Just say whatever you want to say. You also know that I'm not in Crimson City all year round, so I don't know much about it. And where there are people, there will be fights. I know this better than you. If you say that your father is the city lord, no one will object to what he says and does, then I don't believe it. With a smile on his face, Yang Chendong directly sealed off the path of retreat, as if saying, I can see that your father is an honest man, so I hope that you're also an honest man. If there's anything you want to say, then say it to me. Originally, he wanted to sing praises for Crimson City, but suddenly, after Yang Chendong said this, Yu Mian knew that he could hold back those words in his stomach. But at the same time, he was very happy that the sixth young master was so considerate of him. Such a person was worthy of others' loyalty. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he thought for a while before saying, Sixth young master, just as you said, there will be fights where there are people. The higher-ups in Crimson City are indeed not a tight group. There are some people who have doubts about my father's decisions. But all in all, this is just a difference in opinion and a desire for power. At least up to now, no one has caused any major trouble. After all, with Sixth Young Master's reputation and the Security Bureau's people secretly watching, as well as the Special Inspector Bureau's Lord Shen Yu's guarantee on the surface, everything is still peaceful. Yu Mian was being careful and polite, and what he reported was all good news. However, Yang Chendong was not an ordinary person. He could still hear the hidden meaning in his words. Even if everything was peaceful now, it was unknown what would happen in the future. What's going on? Tell me the details. This time, Yang Chendong had already put away his smile, and his expression became much more serious. If he didn't do this, he was afraid that it wouldn't be enough to make Yu Mian tell the truth. It's fine. Yu Mian seemed to want to say something, but in the end, he shut his mouth. And this had already angered Yang Chendong. Then, all right, you can rest for now. In a few days, there will be a carriage that will go to Sea Town to pick up supplies. You can go back to Crimson City with the carriage. After saying this, Yang Chendong slowly stood up. Since Yu Mian didn't want to tell him the truth, he would let him go back. There was no need for him to stay by his side if he couldn't confide in him, let alone hand over such an important city like the first city to him. Chapter 726. He actually asked him to go back. This was obviously a sign of anger. Yu Mian was frightened at this moment. When he came, many people's eyes were red with jealousy. His father had high hopes for him, hoping that he would be able to gain a foothold in the origin city and create a glory similar to the Crimson City. Even when he left, he patted his chest and almost made a military order. It could be said that his family had given him too much hope for his arrival. But now, he was actually going to return empty-handed. One could imagine what would happen if he didn't do anything and went back with his tail between his legs. At that time, not to mention himself, even his father would be implicated. Then, he would become the true sinner of the Yu family. The consequences would be unimaginable and unimaginable. Yu Mian waited for Yang Chendong to leave the pavilion. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly shouted, "Sixth young master, please wait a moment." Stopping in his tracks, Yang Chendong turned around. "What is it? Do you have something to tell me?" Yes. This time, Yu Mian lowered his head. Regardless of whether he was willing or not, he had no choice now. "Then speak." Yang Chendong's expression was calm. "Yes, sixth young master. With the continuous development of Crimson City, there are indeed some people who have become restless and dissatisfied. The most representative of them is Yang Taizhu. This is not his real name. It is a name he changed after coming to Crimson City. His father thinks that this name is more resounding, and is in line with our original intention of conquering the world with martial arts. And his father is Crimson City's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Yang Shan." Since he had already spoken, there was no way out for Yu Mian. Thus, he revealed everything he knew about the situation. Yang Taizhu is a very decisive person. He also has some tricks up his sleeves. Relying on the fact that he is Minister Yang's son, he bullies the good and oppresses the good. Many people who have money and power without any background have been oppressed by him. Not only that, but he also secretly kept the new products produced by the factories in Crimson City, using the excuse that they were not up to standard for his personal use, and then sold them to foreign merchants at a cheaper price. "Sixth young master, as you know, the quality of our Red Nest City's goods is excellent, and the variety of them is wonderful. The demand has always exceeded the supply, and as long as these goods are out of the sea, they can be sold for a good price on land. Because of this, the entire Yang family has become rich. Yang Taizhu used most of this money to establish connections. They used this money to bribe and rope in some officials of various levels in Crimson City, causing their network to grow larger and larger. I'm afraid that it won't be long before these people join forces. They will be able to restrict my father's orders." After saying these words, Yu Mian lowered his head. He knew that he had thrown a huge bomb today. Who knew how many people would be punished after this, and how many heads would fall to the ground because of this? Yang Chendong had been listening quietly, and there was no change in his expression. But in fact, his heart was already overflowing with anger. Everything Yang Taizhu had done, in the words of future generations, was smuggling, and this was stealing from him. Then, he used his money to bribe and collude with some officials. It could be imagined that in the long run, once the net was large enough and the energy was strong enough, the first one to be overthrown would be City Lord Yu Qian, who had faithfully carried out his orders. Perhaps it would be his turn next. To think that he was still fighting a bloody battle on the front lines, risking his life in order to seize more territory as quickly as possible, liberate more people, and accumulate more power and influence. But if the rear was unstable, wouldn't everything he was doing now be a wedding dress for others? If that was the case, he would instead become a puppet. Just the thought of it was laughable. Of course, Yang Chendong wouldn't believe Yu Mian's words. Who knew if Yu Mian, who appeared to be honest and considerate, spoke in such a way because he wanted to eliminate his dissidents? Besides, Crimson City was his base camp. There were too many of his trusted aides there. Would those people turn a blind eye to such a thing? With doubts in his heart, Yang Chendong returned to the pavilion and sat down. Tell me, Yang Taizhu is so lawless. Does no one from the Security Bureau care about him? Could it be that the Special Inspector Bureau is useless? And those people from the military, will they turn a blind eye to it? It was precisely because he had left behind these forces and manpower that Yang Chendong was extremely at ease with Crimson City. He didn't believe that some people and some things could be bribed with money. Couldn't they tell that once he was angered, it would be useless no matter how much money they took out? Yu Mian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked up at Yang Chendong with a troubled expression. Say what you have to say. Don't hesitate. Beta Persei. Call Tiger's mane over. Yang Chendong stared intently at Yu Mian's face as he roared outside. Beta Persei left in a hurry, at a loss. Yang Chendong looked at Yu Mian and said, All right, there are no outsiders here now. Tell me everything you know. Even if you say something wrong, I won't blame you. Furthermore, the matter of you saying something wrong won't spread. Now that things had come to this, Yu Mian had no way out. At that moment, he seemed to have made a decision as he said, Yes, sixth young master. This is the situation. This young Taizhu is very capable. He first wooed one of Fifth Madam's personal maidservants, Lin Lin, and married her. This way, he would have Fifth Madam's support. Then, he joined forces with the director of Crimson City Security Bureau, Chen Shuquan. The sixth young master definitely knows this person. This person doesn't speak much, but as his name suggests, he likes power very much. It can be said that he hit it off with Yang Taizhu. With the support of the Security Bureau, he naturally gets twice the result with half the effort. As for the Special Inspector Bureau, he definitely won't find trouble with Fifth Madam. My father once doubted it, but soon, Lin Lin personally appeared in the City Lord's office. After that, I heard from my father that Lin Lin said that the entire Crimson City belongs to the Yang family. The Yang family's madam only took some money from her family. Is there a need to inform outsiders and use outsiders to criticize her? There's no need to talk about the military. Now that there's a political department, Lang Song and Commander Gao Xiong are thinking of how to compete with them. How could he possibly intervene in the local affairs? Wouldn't that be handing over his weakness to others? Therefore they simply turn a blind eye. As for the other officials, they don't dare to interfere. With the idea that mortals suffer when immortals fight, they hide as much as they can. As long as these people don't provoke them, they will also turn a blind eye. Upon hearing Yu Mian's explanation, Yang Chendong widened his eyes. No one dares to interfere. Didn't the Luan family do anything? Luan Xiaoyu is my future sixth madam. Didn't she stand up? It could be heard that although this was a questioning voice, there was a hint of trembling in his voice. It was unknown if it was because of anger or disappointment. Sixth madam? Ever since you left Crimson City, Sixth Madam led the publicity team to perform for the nearly 5 million Han people. She said that she wanted to change the views and mentality of these people as soon as possible, so she hasn't been in Crimson City. And these things have only happened in the past few months. Sixth Madam doesn't know about it. Yu Mian knew that this was very likely related to a girl's future happiness and the future of a large family. Of course he had to explain it clearly. Upon hearing this, Yang Chendong's expression looked better. But soon he sneered. The Yang family's money is indeed used by the family. There's no need for outsiders to interfere, but the problem is that she's just a maidservant. What right does she have to represent Fifth Madam? For this matter, did Fifth Madam really show up? Yu Mian thought for a while and shook his head. Probably not. At least, Fifth Madam didn't say anything to my father. Humph. Then this Lin Lin acted on her own accord. But Fifth Madam didn't use people to investigate. She is also responsible. Yang Chendong said. This was equivalent to settling the matter. He really didn't expect that such a thing would happen in Crimson City. If not for the fact that he happened to talk to Yu Mian today and discovered some clues, he was afraid that this matter would only get bigger and bigger, and one day, it would become an unsolvable problem. It seems that some people are used to living a peaceful life. They have forgotten what it's like to lick blood on the blade. If that's the case, then don't blame me for being heartless. After speaking, Yang Qindong raised his hand and slammed down on the stone table in the pavilion. Boom! A thunderous sound suddenly rose. After Yang Qindong's anger soared to the sky and he used his qi, the stone table actually cracked and fell to the ground with a loud bang. Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei, who had just entered the courtyard, saw this scene clearly. Young master. Both of them cried out in surprise and then ran over in big strides. After all, Yang Qindong was still made of flesh and blood. When he slammed down, his hand was bleeding. Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei cried out in pain and shock. They hurriedly shouted outside and arranged for the military doctor to bandage the wound. At the same time, both of them looked at Yu Mian angrily. Don't blame Yu Mian. It has nothing to do with him. Since you're here, listen to what Yu Mian has to say. Tell me your thoughts later. Yang Qindong's voice was very calm. He then waved his hand and went to find the military doctor, including his wound. Yang Qindong didn't doubt Yu Mian's words because some things could be found out after an investigation. If he was lying, then even his father Yu Qian couldn't protect him for framing Fifth Madam. After leaving the courtyard and finding the military doctor, Yang Qindong returned to the backyard after bandaging his hand. He saw Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei standing there with flushed faces. Beside them was Yu Mian, who was trembling with fear. He lowered his head and didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Chapter 727. Are you trying to scare Yu Mian? Let me tell you, this has nothing to do with him. He is the hero. Needless to say, Yang Qindong knew that the two of them must have gotten angry in front of Yu Mian. Otherwise, they wouldn't be like this. This subordinate doesn't dare. Yu Mian did see Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei getting angry just now. It was as if they wanted to eat someone, which really gave him a fright. All right, Yu Mian, you don't have to be afraid. You have contributed to this matter. How about this? You go take a walk on the streets first and familiarize yourself with the situation in the beginning city. Then, write a city management report for me to read. We'll talk about the construction of the beginning city when the time comes. You can go now. With a smile on his face, Yang Qindong said to Yu Mian with a pleasant expression. Yu Mian naturally nodded and agreed. He excused himself and resigned. After there was no one else around, Yang Qindong's expression turned cold again. Tell me, what do the two of you think? Kill. Kill all these sinners. Yes, not only do we have to kill them all, but we also have to hold a public trial to clarify their crimes. We have to let all the officials in the Crimson City know what the consequences of doing wrong are. Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei expressed their opinions one after another. After listening to Yu Mian explain everything from the beginning to the end, they were really angry. They didn't expect that while they were fighting for their lives in front of them, the people behind them would be like this. They even felt that their efforts were not worth it. Yes, some people have to be killed. The public trial also has to be held, but the evidence still has to be found first. Crimson City can't be in chaos because of this. It has to develop normally and healthily. Yang Qindong also said as if he had made a decision. Although Xianxia was developing rapidly now, in fact, everything was based on Crimson City. For example, the two provinces of Vietnam and Laos, the development of the beginning city, the expansion of the army, and the improvement of combat power all required a lot of money as a foundation. With money, it was naturally easier to do things. Without money, it was not an exaggeration to say that it was difficult to do anything. For the development of Crimson City, Yang Qindong put in a lot of effort. Not only did he share the fruits of his labor, but he also increased the salaries of the officials to ensure that they could work without any worries. But now it seemed, the human heart could never be satisfied. He originally thought that everyone would be fine, but since there were still problems, he had no choice but to change his strategy. And this was the result of these people asking for it. It seems that I have to rectify my work style. Check it out and immediately send a message to Yang San. Directly ask him what he does as the chief of security and whether he still wants to work. If he doesn't want to work anymore, arrange for him to go to Crimson City to farm. Don't say that I didn't take care of him. Give him 50 mu of land, which is enough for his family to retire now and in the future. Then send a message to Jianghu, scold him and ask him to cooperate with Yang San's next work. Send a message to the first madam, ask her to lecture the fifth madam. Tell her that when I'm not around, she has to take care of the maids under her. Send a message to Shen Yu, scold him, as a person in his position, he has to do his job. If he can't do it, then he should just resign. Send a message to Luan Xiaoyu, with her as the leader, let them carry out a rectification operation, including the military. Yang Qindong issued a series of orders. Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei's expressions also became extremely solemn. They knew that this time, the sixth young master was really angry. He was so angry that he wanted to reshuffle the cards in Crimson City. The orders were issued one by one. The two of them were afraid of forgetting something, so they had already taken out a pen and paper and began to write it down. Not long after, the two of them turned around and went straight to the telegraph room. It could be imagined that there would be a lot of work to be done. After arranging everything, Yang Qindong became relaxed. He walked towards the military supplies that were delivered. This time, there were a lot of commercial goods. He wanted to carry out commercial activities in the first city, so he also wanted to build a commercial street here. Reality told him that he couldn't put all his eggs in one basket. He still had to make multiple preparations. It would be best if the city below could be self-sufficient. In this way, even if there was a problem in one of the links, it would not affect the overall situation. In the following time, Yang Qindong found Yumian. The two of them began to walk through the streets and alleys to plan the future construction of the first city. At this time, several fast boats were heading towards Crimson City from the sea. In the cabin, Yang San, who had a fierce face, was among them. Ever since he received the telegram, he rushed to the nearby dock from the Great Ming Dynasty. Along the way, he had a gloomy face. The fast boat that belonged to the security bureau had already been arranged. After he boarded the boat, he went straight to Crimson City. The telegram was in Yang San's hands. He had already read it countless times. However, every time he read it, his heart would ache. Especially when he saw that he was given 50 mu of land to retire in. He felt a burst of shame. With his indestructible brotherly relationship with Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei, he sent several telegrams back and finally figured out what had happened. He also finally knew why the sixth young master was so angry. Chen Shuquan, you've caused me a lot of trouble. Next, you'll never be able to make a comeback. Sitting in the cabin, Yang San said fiercely in his heart. The work of the security bureau had always been very effective. Because of this, he had received countless praises from the sixth young master. After a long time, he was a little numb. He even had the idea that the work of the security bureau was very easy to do. No matter who was arranged to take up the post, there shouldn't be any problems. Yang San was careless, or rather, he was blinded by victory. He really didn't think about it. The security bureau's achievements today were naturally inseparable from their efforts. However, the more important reason was that Yang Qindong had invested a lot of money in this. The money that the Security Bureau spent in a year alone was more than the annual national taxes of Beiming or Southern Ming. This was still referring to the current situation. The territory wasn't that big, and there weren't many areas that needed to be controlled. As it continued to develop, this money would only be spent more and more. It was precisely with this money as a guarantee that the Security Bureau could get more information and information. It was hateful that Yang San hadn't paid attention to this before, so when he used people again, he didn't pay so much attention to the inspection. For example, Chen Shuquan was also one of the old people when the Security Bureau was first established. His actual ability was very ordinary. It was precisely because he had to be taken care of that he was arranged to be a director in Crimson City. After all, the situation there was the best. As long as he didn't take the initiative to look for trouble, not only was the work easy, it was also easy to achieve results. Yes, the results were out now. Even the sixth young master was alarmed, and he was even scolded because of it. Just based on this, he couldn't tolerate it. Yang San would definitely not show mercy to this kind of person who spoiled a pot of soup with a piece of rat's tea. After such a big incident, Yang San was almost sent home to be a farmer. If this matter couldn't be resolved, he was afraid that this time, he really wouldn't be able to report back. Has the Security Bureau's operation team set off? Yang San thought about some of the things that he needed to do when he arrived at Crimson City and thought that he needed reliable people. He looked at Che Chao and asked. Che Chao was a supervisor under the Security Bureau. He was very capable, but because he was still too young and wasn't in the first batch to enter the Security Bureau, he didn't have enough qualifications. Therefore, he had been staying by Yang San's side to gain experience. This time, he brought Che Chao over to solve Chen Shuchuan's problem better and faster. At the same time, he also wanted to take the opportunity to see if this person had the ability to succeed Yang Shuchuan's position, and if there were any problems with his character. After Chen Shuchuan's incident, Yang San started to pay attention to the character of his subordinates. Reality had already proven that if a person was unreliable, the stronger their ability, the more likely they would become a black sheep. Yang San would definitely not make the same mistake twice. Chief, the operation team has transferred 200 people over. They are all safe and reliable, and they don't have any contact with each other. This time, they were ordered to rush to Crimson City from various places and won't leak any information. It's just that when they enter Crimson City's pier, it might be a little troublesome. The person who spoke was Che Chao. He had delicate features and looked very young. Don't worry, when the time comes, you will stay at the pier and be in charge of receiving them. I will give you my token. Yang San said without the slightest emotion in his eyes. This was also the appearance he often maintained in front of his subordinates. Perhaps only in this way, people couldn't see his true thoughts. With Yang San's token, entering the strictly guarded Crimson City's pier would naturally be incomparably smooth. Che Chao quickly agreed and then shut his mouth. Until now he still didn't know why he suddenly returned to Crimson City, but his intuition told him that there must be some secret mission because if there was a shortage of manpower, there was a Security Bureau branch in Crimson City, and there were quite a number of people there. However, not informing them seemed to indicate a lot of problems. After Yang San asked these questions, he fell back into a state of meditation. He was already planning his every move after entering Crimson City. This time, he didn't want to rely on others. He wanted to personally investigate Chen Shuchuan's problem. If everything was like what the sixth young master said in the telegram, he would solve it according to the family law and cut off this malignant tumor of the Security Bureau with his own hands. Crimson City. It was still incomparably bustling. Even when the sky was dark, the main streets were already brightly lit. In the Great Ming Dynasty, kerosene lamps were still used, and the palace ministers only used candles. Just this point alone was many times better than before. As the citizens of Crimson City, they were also the first to enjoy the benefits of modern electrical industry. Meanwhile, in a courtyard that was known as the Street of Light, some people were doing shady things. Chapter 728. In a secret room, there were only 2 people sitting inside. There was tea and some snacks on the table. Brother Chen, this time Yu Mian went over there. Who knows what he might say? I have to say that you're still too careful. If you did as I said, you should just kill him. Wouldn't that solve the problem once and for all? A slender handsome man with extremely thin lips took the lead to speak up. This person was Yang Taizhu. With a father like Yang Shan and a good appearance, he was blessed by the heavens. It could be said that the heavens treated him well. As long as he behaved himself, he was destined to have a good life. Unfortunately, his ambition was too big, so big that it was beyond his ability. It was only a matter of time before he was destroyed. Sitting opposite Yang Taizhu was an ordinary-looking man. Even if such a person walked on the street, he wouldn't attract anyone's attention because he looked too ordinary. His height was ordinary, his facial features were ordinary, and there was nothing special about him. Such a person was suitable for an organization like the Security Bureau. No matter what, he didn't stand out. He was Chen Shuquan, the director of the Security Bureau in Crimson City. No. Chen Shuquan spoke. Yu Mian absolutely can't be killed. Not to mention that his father is Yu Qian. If something happens to him, it's impossible that no one will come to investigate. When the higher-ups call for this person, if we do this, wouldn't that be exposing ourselves? Yang Taizhu also knew that killing Yu Mian at this time was a little too far-fetched, but for some reason, he had a faint worry in his heart. Ordinary people didn't dare to casually talk about him, but this person had a father who was more powerful than him. Once he saw that person, he really couldn't predict what he would say. Sigh, it's too late to say anything now. I hope he'll be honest and not talk nonsense. Although Yang Taizhu was saying words of comfort, his face was still nervous. Chen Shuchuan's ordinary face chuckled and said, Brother Yang, you don't have to be too worried. Yu Mian isn't that stupid. Saying anything about us won't do him any good. Besides, he has no evidence of our crimes in his hands. Besides, although he has gone to the north, it is still unknown whether he will be able to see that person, or whether he will have the opportunity to meet him alone. Even if he dares to say anything, our security bureau will be the first to receive the news. At least until now, I haven't received any orders. You don't have to worry. Yes. With Brother Chen here, I am naturally not worried. Yang Taizhu chuckled. Then, as if he had thought of something, he asked, By the way, Brother Chen, do you think the security bureau will secretly arrange for other people to come to Crimson City? I don't think so, Chen Shuquan said confidently. The director has a good relationship with me. He won't suspect me easily. If he really has any thoughts, he should ask me first. Even if he sends someone to investigate, he should inform me. Even if you don't inform me, my men are watching the docks day and night. It will be as difficult as ascending to the heavens for anyone who wants to get to the docks without being noticed. Chen Shuquan was indeed very confident. He was equally confident in his relationship with Yang San. Logically speaking, he was right. If it was just an ordinary person who complained, Yang San would really inform him beforehand. After all, suspecting a subordinate for no reason would only make the other brothers bitterly disappointed. But he forgot one thing. It depended on who was the one who complained. What if it was Yang Chendong who gave the order? Then it wouldn't be a complaint, but 100% execution of the order. If Yang Chendong gave the order, Yang San would definitely attract great attention. Not only that, but he would also have to do a good job. Even if there was no problem, he must provide evidence. Under such circumstances, how could Yang San inform Chen Shuquan about it? At this moment, it could only be said that Chen Shuquan was too confident, so confident that he was a little arrogant. It was a pity that no matter if it was Chen Shuquan or Yang Taizhu, they didn't think too much about it. They only thought that even though Yang Chendong was formidable, to the extent of having an incomparable status in the entire Yang faction, in all of Crimson City, a person was a person. He wasn't a god, how could he possibly care about everything? Furthermore, they didn't do anything to betray Xianxia. They were just using their power and status to earn more money. Was there anything wrong with that? Which dynasty, which family didn't use this opportunity to develop? What they did wasn't a big deal, so it wouldn't attract Yang Chendong's attention. Yu Mian's matter seemed to have come to an end here. Following that, the two of them talked about the Luan family. The Luan family was a special existence in the entire Crimson City. The Yang family only had a total of 4 people, but these 4 people all held high positions and held different positions and influence in different industries. Especially their daughter, Luan Xiaoyu. When she reached the age, she would become the 6th madam. How could such a family not be illustrious? In Crimson City, anyone with ambition would have the idea of getting close to the other party. Because once they obtained the friendship of the other party, no matter what they did in the future, it would be twice the result with half the effort. Yang Taizhu had been thinking about this recently. Considering the current situation of the Luan family, he was powerless against Luan Qi and Luan Qi's mother, Zhou Hua. These two had power and status, and were busy with work every day. Outsiders simply didn't have the time to come into contact with them. As for his daughter, Luan Xiaoyu, her identity meant that no one would dare to have any ideas about her. Even Yang Taizhu couldn't, and even his father, Yang Shan, didn't dare to touch her. After thinking about it, there was only one Luan Shaochen. This person was placed in an important position, and had already become the governor of Lao province at a young age. His future was limitless. Most importantly, he had a fatal flaw, and that was that he was young, and he still didn't have a wife. Although Luan Shaochen had already married 2 concubines in order to appease the hearts of the nobles in Lao Lao, and also in order to give birth to the Luan family, he didn't have a wife. In the eyes of others, that was the high and mighty position, and only then was he recognized by the outside world as a member of the Luan family. Currently, Yang Taizhu and Chen Shuquan were discussing the matter of finding a wife for Luan Xiaoyu. They had already thought about it. As long as this wife was one of their own, then if anything critical happened in the future, this person would play an absolutely crucial role. This was equivalent to not only establishing a relationship with the fifth madam, but also joining forces with the sixth madam's family. At that time, as long as the two pillow winds blew, and the one above loosened her mouth, even if there was a huge matter, it could be suppressed. We have to hurry up with the matter of finding someone. He's not young anymore, and finding a wife is only a matter of time. If it wasn't for that statement that the wife of a high-ranking official must be a Han, I'm afraid that there would already be arrangements and we wouldn't have a chance. Yang Taizhu thought about this matter and reminded Che Chao, who was sitting opposite him. Brother Yang, don't worry, I have already arranged for the security bureau to search the city. It's just that your requirements are a bit too high. You need to be young and beautiful, and you also need to have a clean background. The most important thing is that you listen to us. This kind of search is somewhat contradictory, so it dragged on for a few days. While Che Chao was complaining, Yang Tieju's eyes were already wide open. The person must be beautiful, otherwise Luan Shaochen might not be able to take a fancy to her. Her background must also be clean. Do you think that when the Luan family is looking for a wife, they won't let people investigate? As for listening to us, this is even more important. We won't be kind enough to make a wedding dress for others. The person we find must be helpful to us. Yang Taizhu didn't relent, and Chen Shuquan could only sigh and nod. Okay, I'll continue to arrange for people to search. By the way, the latest batch of goods should be out of the cabin. When will you give me a definite letter? I'll start to arrange it. Well, it'll be soon. It'll be in 3 days at the new dock. I've already arranged everything that needs to be arranged. When the time comes, all you need to do is to send people from the security bureau to temporarily seal off the dock for 4 hours. Then, everything will be ready. Chen Shuquan nodded when he heard this. That's easy, it's not the first time we've done such a thing. Ha ha ha. The two looked at each other at this moment and smiled. The so-called status and power were all transient, only the gold and silver in their hands were real. As long as they had money, where couldn't they be happy and carefree? The two were still secretly plotting here, and from time to time, their laughter could be heard, which was a kind of imagination for the future. But what they didn't know was that while they were talking, the director of the security bureau, Yang San, had already arrived at the new dock on a fast boat without anyone noticing. He was stopped by the security bureau of the Crimson City, who were guarding here day and night. After Yang San led Che Chao and dozens of people off the fast boat, he took out the pass issued by the security bureau, and Leng Feng, who was guarding the dock, allowed them to pass according to the regulations. But soon, 4 secret agents of the security bureau surrounded them. Wait, you said that you have a pass from the security bureau, but why haven't we heard about this? Take it out and let us have a look. 4 men dressed like commoners walked over. Then, they looked at Yang San's group of dozens of people with arrogant looks on their faces. Who do you think you are? Che Chao stepped forward. For a small fry like this, there was no need for the director to come out personally. The people of the security bureau were used to doing whatever they wanted. Suddenly, they saw someone who was more arrogant than them. The 4 of them looked at each other, then laughed. Yo, I didn't know that you're so brave. Do you know who we are? Let me tell you. Have you heard of the security bureau? You actually want to enter the city under our banner. Then you have to go through us first. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.